I love making videos about hell. For one, every time I do, I get flooded with emails featuring great subject lines like,
"Very important, not a religious crackhead."
But also, I am constantly fascinated by how different artists tackle depicting the same subject matter. There are so many wildly different takes on hell, from the hopeless void presented in What Dreams May Come to the grassy fields seen in Chainsaw Man. There is more than one way to skin a cat. Which, by the way, is an awful saying. But I cannot get enough of how many varying depictions of hell there are. In fact, over the duration of this past week alone, I watched, read, and played through nearly 10 different versions of hell. And I am here today to talk to you about 4 of the craziest ones. These are some of the wildest depictions of hell you will hear about, unless you can't hear, I guess, which in that case, these will be the most insane depictions that you have ever lip-read. In this video, I will be covering 2 films, a book, and a game, amongst other tangents, but before we dive into all of that, I do need to give a quick spoiler warning for all of the different media that will be spoiled. I have time-stamped when I will be yapping about what, plus there is an index down below in the description which does also include the music used, but still, some discussion may spill over, so here is a general spoiler warning. For the audio-only crowd, I will be spoiling Baskin, Jigoku, and Jigoku, A Short Stay in Hell, and Afterparty. Be sure to let me know down below either your favorite depictions of hell or ones that you find compelling and that you think I should check out. If you enjoyed this video or anything else I've been doing recently, feel encouraged to like and subscribe or to support me on Patreon. For a minimum price of just $1 a month, you can have your name shouted out at the end of every future video. I knew borderline nothing about the 2015 Turkish film Baskin going in. Actually, all I knew was that it depicted hell in some way. And halfway through the movie, I found myself absolutely perplexed with how that was going to happen. Baskin is the story of a group of police officers who seem to spend most of their free time at this small restaurant, drinking and harassing the waitstaff. One of the cops goes to the bathroom, sees a frog, and promptly loses his mind. I would have had a similar reaction, to be fair. I really like frogs. If you didn't know, I proposed to my wife whilst frog hunting. But anyway, the cops get a strange call for backup, which they respond to, but en route, they hit someone and crash their van. They then proceed on foot to an old abandoned police station. Holy shit, more frogs, so many frogs, what kind are they? They look kind of like marsh frogs to me. Holy shit, there are more? But they go inside and, you know, some movies take their time building tension, creating dread. Often this is referred to as a slow burn. This is not one of those films. I really appreciate how suddenly the horror kicks in, because out of nowhere, there are these cultists covered in blood and viscera doing unspeakable things to each other. And they capture the policemen and drag them past a museum of horrors and into a dungeon where we meet the father. This guy makes the movie. The father is played by Mehmet Jarahoglu, who, despite having zero background in art or theater, no acting experience at all, gives one of the best performances I have ever seen in a horror film. He is effortlessly scary, and that really doesn't have all that much to do with his appearance. He was born with a rare skin condition that gives him a pretty unique look, but it's his mannerisms, the way that he holds himself, that makes this character so eerie. He's almost sort of delicate with the way that he moves, but also deliberate. and he preaches this bizarre, mystical philosophy. I love when villains have super wacky belief systems. The father actually reminds me a lot of the Cenobites from the Hellraiser franchise. He's got similar interests. They'd all get along pretty well. The men are tortured and murdered, all except for one who kills the father and escapes but is then hit by a van. The very same vehicle from earlier containing all of the cops, and the movie ends, the whole thing revealed to be a loop, and also probably hell from the start. As a depiction of hell, where this really excels is in its occupants. All of the cultists are really gross, and then of course the father is remarkably frightening and by far the best part of the film. Director Jan Evernal and his team managed to shoot the entire movie in under a month, which they often had to do in secret without the use of the proper permits. And speaking of filming without the proper permits, I am standing in Roosevelt Park, the birthplace of one of my hometown's local legends. The story goes that in 1973, a pair of devil worshippers kidnapped a young woman and sacrificed her in this very spot in order to open a portal to hell. I have been digging through so many fictional depictions of hell that I thought I might as well go and try to find it in real life. And according to a couple of lunatics 50 odd years ago, this was it, right here. Now, as a depiction of hell, this flounders in almost every way. There's nothing scary about this little alcove located at the back of a mostly empty park. Nothing punishing. In fact, on a fairly temperate day like today, it's actually kind of pleasant. This is probably the only depiction of hell that I would bring Pancake to. Now, does that make this area actually a fairly idiosyncratic depiction of hell? Well, yeah, I suppose so. It is also a pretty nice place to read. In fact, I finished Stephen L. Peck's novel, A Short Stay in Hell, on a bench just right over there.
Welcome to Hell. This hell is based upon a short story by Jorge Luis Borges from your world called The Library of Babel. Here you will find all the books that can possibly be written. When you are ready to leave, find the book describing your earthly life story and submit the story through the slot below this sign. If the story is accepted, you will be admitted into a glorious heaven, filled with wonders and joys beyond your imagination.
I said novel earlier, but Stephen L. Peck's A Short Stay in Hell is actually a novella, weighing in at a humble 108 pages in length.
Not so much as a book as a pamphlet, no? Kind of on the thin side, isn't it?
A Short Stay in Hell is the story of a Mormon man named Soren who, after dying, finds himself trapped in Zoroastrian hell, which can take many forms, but in his case is a basically never-ending library. Tasked with finding the book containing the story of his life, Soren, along with millions of others condemned to the same fate, attempt to navigate their given mission, whilst also contending with one another and themselves. The book's title is ironic. Soren's Stay in Hell is not a short one. There is a 100-year time jump early on that is really jarring at first, but quickly becomes such an inconsequential amount of time that I forgot that it even happened. So much time passes inside the library that the occupants develop their own cultures and histories. There are House of Leaves style expeditions in search of the library's edges that last decades. There are romances that span centuries, single conversations that last even longer. Where this depiction of hell truly excels is in a very specific type of horror, and that is the fear of large numbers. Our brains just weren't built to comprehend how much a billion is. A million seconds is about 11 days. A billion seconds is 31 and a half years. In Hell's library, as a depressed mathematician, Soren meets along the way, calculates there are 95 raised to the 1,312,000th power number of books. The mathematician gave Soren an evil, mischievous look. In fact, I've calculated the dimension of the library. You say you're from 30,000 miles up. Did you wonder when you would hit the bottom? He laughed bitterly. Well, if you were somewhere near the middle of hell, you only have 10 to the 1,297,377th light years to go. Soren cried out, "I'll never get to the bottom." The man shook his head in disgust. "Oh, you'll reach the bottom." He laughed bitterly. "Just not for a very, very long time."
Dim, dam, dadilam, vacarme, s'en va donc.
Nobuo Nakagawa's film Jigoku, for starters, looks incredible for a film released in 1960. In comparison to the only other Japanese horror film from this era that I've seen, Onibaba, it looks far more modern. And like Onibaba, it is put on a similar pedestal, revered art house horror. But I was shocked by how, dare I say, sleazy Jigoku was. There is a lot of sordid stuff in this movie, and it also just isn't very good. But then with about 10 minutes left in the film, I realized that I was watching the wrong Jigoku. The Jigoku that I had put on was a remake released in 1999, which was pretty funny because that swung me from thinking that this movie looked really great for its age to this movie looks terrible for a film released in 1999. So then I found the correct Jigoku. Watched 15 minutes or so of that before I realized that it was in fact also not the correct Jigoku, but was a 1979 version. So I signed up for a Criterion free trial to watch the actual, for real, original Jigoku. Which I will say is still kind of surprisingly lascivious, but much more in line with what I was expecting. Jigoku is the story of an extremely unfortunate man named Shiro, whose best friend is an asshole and involves him in a hit and run. Later, his girlfriend is killed in a traffic accident, and then Shiro witnesses the death of his aforementioned best friend. He falls in love again with a nurse, but she too is killed, and then Shiro is murdered. He wakes up in hell, aka Jigoku, which is the Japanese interpretation of Buddhist hell. Where Jigoku differs from most Christian interpretations of hell is mainly in its complexity. There are far more layers or circles or whatever in Jigoku. There are tens of thousands of greater and lesser hells. There's a hell for everything in Jigoku. It is also in many ways far more punishing than the Christian hell, which really went against all of my uneducated and preconceived notions of Buddhism. In the 1960 Jigoku, hell is shrouded in darkness. Its inhabitants and landmarks glow through the gloom. Everything looks really dreamlike, but also eerie. It's all gorgeous too, by the way. This movie looks incredible. I am a sucker for some nice classic film grain. Shiro meets Enma, the king of hell, who is not analogous to the devil, by the way. The devil is usually evil and seeks to tempt people into committing sin, but Enma is just a judge, and often even depicted as a righteous figure. In the 1999 Jigoku, as Queen Enma, she even seeks to deter the living from committing misdeeds. However, King Enma from the 1960 film is kind of unfair. I'm not sure that Shiro deserved to be condemned to hell for something that ostensibly wasn't even his fault. But anyway, I just have to point out, again, how cool the glowing figures and landscapes look, set against an empty backdrop. The colors that are present too are vivid as well, which provides a really nice contrast. There is a lake of blood, which is pretty sick. The way that the tortures of hell are depicted in this film have a very psychological edge to them, which makes it all the more disturbing. Since I did accidentally watch the other two Jigokus, I went back and finished that 1979 adaptation. I'm going to talk about their respective depictions of hell too, real quick. The 1979 version, which by the way is a wild psychosexual thriller, depicts hell pretty similarly to the original. There is a black backdrop present, juxtaposed by luminous scenery and characters, but a lot of the effects in this version didn't really work for me. The VFX technology wasn't quite there yet for what they were trying to accomplish. I do really like a lot of the sets that they built though. They really cranked up the fog machine for this one for sure, and there are also worm people, so that is a bonus. The 1999 version is especially unhinged. Most of the film is dedicated to following the exploits of a dangerous cult. There's also a bit concerning a serial killer, and it is all fairly jumbled and disjointed, which makes sense considering the film was the product of cutting two unfinished works together. Like I mentioned earlier, Enma in this is a virtuous character, but also still pretty wrathful, and she's one of the best parts of the movie. Like the 1979 version, the effects here aren't great, but they are still pretty fun. This film has a far more lowbrow kind of feel, so it all kind of adds to the charm. Enma's servants also get a lot more screen time in this one. And they are pretty fun, but as a depiction of hell, this adaptation lacks a lot of imagination. Most of these spaces shown just feel very empty and void of the vision that made that original film's depiction so exceptionally striking. There aren't a lot of games that simulate the experience of hell. Believe it or not, eternal damnation isn't the easiest concept to stuff into a video game, plus why would anyone even want to do that? Condemnation to hell wouldn't exactly make for great gameplay. There are quite a few titles that do take place in hell, but they are still mostly power fantasies. In the Doom series, you play as an indestructible one-man army gunning down the legions of demons with reckless abandon. The same goes for similar titles like Ultrakill. In Dante's Inferno, Dante literally kills death. Player empowerment is a bit of a necessary evil. Obviously, it would be a bit jarring if halfway through one of these games you were defeated by a boss, and then the game just ended. There are a handful of games that put the player in the position of one of Hell's torturers. These titles are, let's just say, indulgent, but it is not often that the player is cast in the role of the torturee, which is not a real word, but should be. The closest thing I could find to a game accomplishing this, or at least taking a crack at it, is Night School Studios' 2019 game Afterparty. Afterparty is a sort of point-and-click, narrative-driven adventure game where you play as Milo and Lola, who I mistakenly thought were siblings for like half the game, but are actually just best friends. They are both killed in a car accident and end up stuck together in hell, which is depicted as a bar-heavy city avenue, kind of like 6th Street in Austin or Bourbon Street in New Orleans. And it's all located inside of a giant lava-laden cave. Throughout the duration of the game, as Milo and Lola, you will venture through a classic rock bar, a skull-covered tavern, a freaky club, and last but not least, the Devil's House, where he is throwing a funky little get-together with friends. After infiltrating said get-together, Milo and Lola learn that the only way out of hell is to out-drink and out-party the devil, which they do eventually accomplish, sort of. If you're me, you mess the drinking minigame up and Lucifer takes pity on you and basically just lets you go. I sucked at all the minigames in this, by the way, the beer pong especially, but I do like how they portrayed the devil in this. He's actually a pretty nice guy, which I always think is pretty fun. His friends and family stage an intervention for him at the end, which I thought was pretty funny, and in general, a lot of the humor in this did really work for me, even if the dialogue on the whole was very awkwardly written. There are a handful, too, of just very strange lines. Like, someone at some point described something as the hot new diarrhea.
but they're the hot new diarrhea, so Satan booked him for his house party.
There is a taxi driver who shuttles you between inhabited areas, and these empty spaces were a big missed opportunity for me. There are billboards in the background sometimes, but they don't have anything interesting or funny on them. And in general, this depiction of hell does feel a bit too sparsely populated. But I do really like how different demons and people can often be seen just going about their business. There's some guys stuck in a set of pillories, there's all sorts of wacky stuff going on, and a lot of it makes this hell feel very lived in. Even if, again, I wish there was a little bit more going on. Milo and Lola are assigned a personal demon who pops in every now and then to torture them psychologically, but aside from that, they get off pretty easy, which maybe makes sense considering we're never actually told what they did to deserve being condemned to hell, but in general, there are a lot worse versions you could find yourself stuck in. This is a pretty friendly depiction, even if it is still exceedingly wild. You know, maybe even hell can be a pretty good time if you play your cards right. I want to thank y'all so much for your viewership and for the continued support on this channel. It really, really, truly means the world, just so much more than I can put into words, and I am constantly in awe of just how kind y'all all are. I especially want to thank my patrons. Uelmen, Katie La Bombard, Ethan Zudo Show, Jay is Ait, Braden Surfos, Joy Barnett, Nina Verkowski, Curbing, Sean C, Addison S, Martha Barnett, Drew K, Muffin, Totally Awesome, and Lance B.